baseball a little bit. A few years ago, I started going down to the Orioles Dream Week. And 2 years ago, in 2017, in January, I was down there playing, and I ran into this gentleman down there. He was a rookie. This is his first year down there, and he wasn't on my team, but it struck me as, here's a guy that, he is just making the most of his time down there. He's like a kid in a candy store. When we're down there at Dream Week, you have all the players in the locker room, and around the sides of the locker room are all these former Major League players, and there are coaches down there. And Danny is standing by them, and they're telling stories, and he's all into it the whole time. He's there, fully engaged, and getting the most he can out of his experience. And like I say, he wasn't on my team. Well, our team that year didn't even play his team, but I knew who he was down there just from his interactions with the people that were down there, and with the coaches and with the other players for it as through it. 2 months later, in March, I got an email saying that Danny was in the hospital. That he had contracted Staph B virus, it was a flesh-eating virus, and that very good chance that he was going to lose his legs and his arm, and that he was actually fighting for his life. And of course, I brought it to our attention at our church and at my parents' church, and we were all praying for him over there. I'm not going to, tell the whole story here for him, because I think that's part of what he's going to say here today, and I don't want to take everything away from him as he gets here to speak. But his reaction to this adversity in his life, I think, is amazing, and what God has given to him, and what he's taken from that, and the lessons that he's learned. I think something that we probably all can learn a little bit about today. And so I'd like to introduce Dan Benner.
Hey guys, my name's Danny. This is a very humbling experience for me. I thought about, when Todd asked me this, he asked me this months back, and I thought to myself what I was going to say, maybe what I have to offer, and it became clear. The story I want to talk today is about miracles, a series of miracles that have happened in my life. I want to thank Todd and the congregation over the last 2 years for all their support, prayers, financially. Todd's been in contact periodically with me through this whole thing, sending cards, things of that nature. But I had a life before all this happened to me, and I had sort of a jaded past before my good life happened to me. And so my first experience growing up as a kid, I can remember being, I would watch all the Jesus movies and religious movies around Christmas and all the holidays. And I remember always crying and all when they got to the crucifixion scene, and it always touched my heart as a little kid. And I grew up like that, and I remember going to church as a little kid with my mother, and we'd get with the cousins, and we all go to church. And we had something called, and I think it was around Easter time, but we had something called the gospel bus. And what it was it was a piggy bank that was shaped like a bus. And all the Sunday student kids would go around and get donations put in their gospel bus. And then we turned them in when it was time. Well, I can remember, I guess I was probably about 8, 9 years old. And we turned in our gospel buses, and then it must have meant a lot to me because I'm 50 now and I still remember the gospel buses got stolen. And I'm not sure, you know, because at that age, if you know, the treasurer stole them, someone in the congregation, I'm just not sure. But I know that it touched me so much then that I still remember it now. So that was a memory that I had growing up, and I kind of went astray. I went from that boy that would, God-fearing little kid that went from crying from the movies, watching, like I said, with Christ. And I had my parents separated at a young age, and I kind of took the wrong direction, and I got really involved in drugs at a young age. And I don't want to stay on that subject, but it's very important I talk about it for a minute because it's where the first miracle takes place. So I started doing drugs at like 15 years old, hard drugs, and they progressed very fast. And I continued to do those drugs till I was like 27 years old. And we'll just go and say, at the end of it, at the end of the road, when I became homeless and hopeless, and I was blessed with the gift of desperation because it came to a point where I no longer wanted to live like that, but I didn't know how not to. So I would like to say I made a choice to stop using them, but that just wouldn't be true because they were much more powerful than that. I couldn't make that choice. So the choice I did make, and I remember it just like it was yesterday, and this was December the 22nd, 1995, is where the first miracle of my awareness took place. And I remember I just became homeless, and I asked my mother at 27 if I could move back in with her in her basement. And she said that I could, and I had everything that belonged to me in 27 years fit in 2 hefty bags. That's what I'd accumulated in 27 years of my life, from making bad decisions one after another. And what I've learned is that it's the whole time I'm trying to fill a void with another substance, with something. And what I learned is that a spiritual void that I was trying to fill with the wrong things. So I was on that car ride home, or not my home, my mother's home. I was on that car ride to take me to her house with my 2 hefty bags of stuff that I accumulated. And I had a change jar that I think had about $16 in it. I think that's what I had. And I remember sitting in the back seat and asking God to please help me. And I've asked that prayer lots of times over those years. But this time was different. This time it wasn't just like a get me out of trouble God prayer. Just make this go away in a couple of days, I'll be fine, and forget about you again. And this time it was, I was at the end of the rope, and I asked God to please help me. And you hear the term of a spiritual awakening, and my whole body felt different just that instant, and I could feel like a joyous feeling come over me. And to this day, that was December 22nd, 1995. I've never touched a drug since. Now,
Amen.
Don't just disregard that miracle and think, well, this is a drug addict. That's a very powerful thing. when you get to that point in your life, and for me to realize that the miracle had taken place, that I lost the obsession to want to use ever again, and to this date never have. That was the first miracle that I'm aware of in my life. So I'm going to move forward a little. So with that, you know, when you stop doing things like that, good things naturally start to happen in your life. Your life gets better. You know, and I started to become a productive member of society, and started, you know, working on a daily basis. I got a job right away I stayed with. And I was there for like 10 years. In the middle of that, I met Judy here. This is my wife. By the way, she is the only woman here because my driving skills are lacking right now, so she had to bring me. So I met Judy, and you know, we were both in our mid-30s, late 30s, and excuse me. And we really hit it off good, and I really neither of us had any plans, really, of children. We kind of were a little bit selfish, you know, what we could do and go where we wanted to and do what we wanted to. We both had decent jobs. So it wasn't really a big thing about the children, but somehow in the middle of that, you know, we started talking about children. I guess inside, maybe we both really wanted them, but we avoided them, you know, all our lives up to this point before we met. So anyway, we were blessed, and we had a son, and he's a typical boy. He's all into sports, does all these things, and I really took to like playing all the sports with him and managing his baseball teams growing up, things of that nature, and we really got close like that. And a lot of those things have changed, and it's hard to deal with that. And I do well, and I tell my wife, sometimes I just push the emotion down inside. I met Tom, like you said, in Dream Week playing baseball. And when I came home from playing baseball, I just got back to my regular routine, going to work every day. I was a simple guy, and I was fine being a simple guy. I was fine just going to work every day, you know, raising my, you know, kid, having my family life. That's who I was. You know, we vacation like other families do. Once a year we go to a show, go on a nice vacation, but a pretty basic family, and we were content with that, and fine with that. I can remember waking up the one morning, and I was shivering. It's in March 19th. I was shivering real bad, and I told my wife, I said, you know, I come downstairs, I said, I think I got the flu. I said, you know, I don't think much of it. I think I got the flu. I went back upstairs. I said, I'm just going to go upstairs and sweat it out. You know, the flu, 3 or 4 days, you get better. Well, 2.5 days later, she was working, and we had a sitter over to watch my son because I was still very sick. And I woke up, and I knew it wasn't the flu anymore. And I was delirious. I was dripping, sweating, freezing, and my left arm was hurting really bad. So I called down the stairs to the sitter, and it's something because I said to myself, do I just go back to sleep and try to sleep this off and wake up in the morning? And I had enough awareness to just realize that this was more than that. And so I called out for help, and I told the babysitter to call 911. And she said, well, she'd already talked to Judy, and she's on her way home because she knows you're bad off. So when Judy got there, we went right to the hospital, the local hospital. And we pulled up and it was packed with people. And I thought, if I gotta wait in this waiting room, I'm gonna die right here. And this is how sick I was. And I didn't realize really how sick I was, but it's how sick I felt. And I said, I told her, I said, go ahead and tell them I'm having a heart attack. I said, and they'll get me right in the front of the line. So she went in, told him her husband's really sick, needs immediate attention. They came out and like 4 nurses drugged me out of the car and sat me in a wheelchair, pushed me in. And the doctor was talking, in medical terms that I didn't understand. Now, my wife's a respiratory therapist, so she's in the medical world and she understands these things. And they put like a central line down my neck, and that was the last thing that I remembered until I woke up almost 2.5 weeks later. So this is kind of now the beginning of the second miracle. They kept me at that hospital for about 16 hours. My wife went home, tried to get some rest, be with the kid. At this point, we still didn't know it was all this bad. And the hospital called my wife and said, look, we can't handle what's going on with your husband. We need to send him to University of Maryland Shock Trauma. So when by the time my wife got the shock trauma, she's got to make arrangements, get a sitter for the kid, things of this. It's all a lot of work behind the scenes that my wife's doing. And she gets the shock trauma. They're doing I'm already in surgery. They call in and they had removed my left arm. And when they called, when they got out of surgery, they met my wife, they pulled her in the consultation room and said that it was necrotizing fasciitis. Now, I looked up necrotizing fasciitis, and it's 0.4 out of every 100,000 people get necrotizing fasciitis. And of that, 50% of those people end up with some form of brain damage. And it's like a 30% chance of living if you do. So they called my wife in the consultation room and broke this down to her with the necrotizing fasciitis and said they weren't sure that they got everything. They would have to go back in and check. And for several days I went in for, they had to take more and more off every day. So right from the very first surgery, my life's never going to be the same. My family's life is never going to be the same. My wife's forced to make some very, very big decisions. And do we keep going, or do we just let this, end? We're talking about cutting the rest of this off. And now, unfortunately, the drugs that I'm on have cut all the blood flow away from my extremities. So, my wife's forced to make another decision. Do we keep doing this? Do we keep doing this, cutting away at him? Or do we let him die? And I don't think the family, the doctors, anyone would have looked at my wife any different if she'd have just chosen the other way. My wife told the doctors, as long as he has his heart and his mind, do all you can to save him. And she realized that she still had a 9-year-old boy who needed a father. And when I think about that, the choices that my wife had to make, they started talking about going in. Underneath here, you could see all the way down to my ribs. And they started talking about removing ribs because they thought it might have gotten into my lungs, which meant I'd been on a permanent ventilator forever. And my wife saying, being in the respiratory field, she figured she could handle that. And it just makes me think that my wife was willing to give the rest of her life up really to save my life. When the story turns and when you think about it, when my wife took her vows, she's really stood up to what her vows truly meant. Because it was definitely for better or worse and forever. And that's where we live at. We're challenged, to say the least. My wife and child make the best of this situation with me. I always tell people I have to go through this because this happened to me, but my wife goes through it because she chooses to. Because I've heard some terrible stories from nurses and not doctors, but the aides that would come around and say how the other partners had left them when situations like this happened. In the midst of this all, they got to the point where they told my wife that they had to cut my legs off or I was going to die. So Judy, doing what Judy does, she made another big decision and moved forward with it, prayed about it, moved forward. And I thank God she did that because I'm here today to raise my son. I know I'm a good dad. There's some things I can't do, but I'm a really good father. And I wouldn't have had the chance to be that if she wouldn't have made the decisions that she's made in life. So the second miracle we're talking about, I was on death's door many a times in those 2.5 weeks. There was a lot of final decisions made about me making it or not. And even with the decisions she made, the possibilities were really good that I still would pass. So the second miracle is that I just made it through this alive. This was leaving shock trauma, and they put me onto another floor above shock trauma. But I started to get, when I woke up, I started to get visitors, a boatload of visitors wanted to come and see me. And I remember coming to, and this was my first memory, my wife, they pulled the tube out, wanted to see if I could breathe on my own. And this is a pretty scary thing, because it's like, I was on it for a few weeks, and it's kind of a timeline. If you don't get off in so long, it's a good possibility you stay on it. And so they pulled it out, and it ended up I could breathe on my own. But I told my wife, I said my arm's really, really numb. I said, it's really numb like pins and needles, like I've been sleeping on it. And she got her face started tearing up. And she was like, I've never lied to you. And she said, I'm just going to tell you. She said, you got sick, you got an infection, and they had to amputate your arm. Now, back up a minute, when I woke up, I kept asking her, what's wrong? Because I could see in the room. I didn't know I was in a hospital, but something wasn't right, I knew that. And I was bandaged all up, and some tubes sticking out of me. And that's when I asked her that question. And I was so emotionless when she told me what had happened. And I'm sure a great deal of that's from the medication I was on. But then I told her, I said, please take my work boots off. And she told me once again, she said, look, we had to amputate your feet too. And it was like nothing, if I could explain it. It was like nothing. I didn't feel anything. But I kind of just like drifted in and out the rest of that day. I had a few visitors come and see me. But when I started, waking up with, a little bit more constantly, I'd wake up and stay awake longer, and I started getting a grasp of what was going on, that I was in the hospital, and everything, my whole life was never going to be the same. And I hadn't seen my child in weeks, and I so missed my kid. They wouldn't let him come up to shock trauma. And I started praying every morning for God to fill my heart, and for acceptance of what has happened to me. And I remember in the hospital, the aides and everyone, when I got out, I will say, like, the danger zone and started to come around, I had this really good spirit in me. And in spite of everything that happened, I still had the full heart that I prayed for every morning, and I asked God to please help me, please help my family. And people started coming by the droves to visit me. I was in the hospital over 3 months, 3 months and a week, and with the exception of the couple of days Judy stopped visitors because I was really sick, I never went a day without getting a visitor. That's the support that I had. That's the support I had while I was in the hospital. Now, I felt in the early stages when it was that people were just coming to see me as a let's see him before he passes away kind of visit. And I could see that, and I could feel it when they would like give me a kiss on the cheek on the way out the door, and like inside, would this be the last time that I see you? And it talks about in the Bible where you get closest to God in your darkest hours. And I can remember the one night. So there's a difference between us all knowing we're going to die and actually feeling that right in that moment that you're going to die, you're getting ready to die. And I had that happen to me when I was very, very sick one night, and remember calling my wife and telling her, come back to the hospital. I think this is going to be it. I think I'm passing away tonight. And I remember talking to God, and like I said, when you get that feeling, when you're actually going to pass, you develop a really, really strong contact with God at that moment, I can tell you that. So, anyway, I started getting better. They started talking about moving me to Kernan Hospital. Kernan's a rehabilitation hospital. I got to Kernan, and I was in bedridden like for the first 2 weeks in Kernan, and I had to do like some kind of therapy. Well, let me back up a minute before I got to Kernan. I met a hand surgeon after they did all the amputations, and my hands had all the fingers that were cut off of them, and they wanted to try to save this hand. So he sewed it into my abdomen. So for like 2 weeks, my hand was sewn into my abdomen, and like for the first 8 days, I had to lay completely flat on my back. And I wasn't eating everything, it wasn't I'd say it was the worst, probably 8 days of my life in there. And it moved me over to Kernan Hospital to start rehabilitation. And I couldn't get out of bed for the first couple of weeks. And then finally when I got out of bed, they put me in this big motorized wheelchair. And I had to operate it with my head because, like I said, all my limbs were gone. This was sewn inside of me. And I had to operate the wheelchair with my head. And I can remember going through the grounds when they took me into the gym for the first time. And this was before I was able yet to start therapy in the gym, but they wanted to get me to get a look at the gym. And I can remember looking around in the gym and seeing these people and saying to myself, my God, I'm the worst person in here. And I truly felt it. I mean, everything's bandaged up. No legs, no arm. And I didn't even know yet that I didn't have a shoulder for some reason. I thought just my arm was gone. And I'll tell you this, how this happened that I discovered it. I was finally FaceTiming my son. I hadn't seen him yet in person. I was FaceTiming him. And you know, in the corner, when you FaceTime, you can see your picture in the corner. And I was talking to my son, and I looked at my picture in the corner, and all this was gone. I had no idea it was over. I guess because everything was bandaged up and I didn't realize it. But all that was gone, and the conversation with my son at that time, I didn't know if I really was ever going to see him again because they wouldn't let him in. The first time when I was in that gym looking around, saying to myself, I'm the worst person in here. I didn't believe I was ever going to walk again. The whole hand, my whole arm, everything's gone. I got another hand that has no fingers on it. But as I started going back there day by day to the gym at Kernan, I started realizing it was God made me aware of some things. And it was quite clear I wasn't the worst person there. I might have looked like it at face value, but I started seeing young men that were 22 years old with gunshots that were never gonna walk again, from the neck down, paralyzed, and started seeing some people that were brain damaged and couldn't hold a conversation. Up to this point, you know, I was fine regarding everything mentally. I wasn't sure yet that I was going to walk after they started talking about prosthetics, things of that nature. But I want to talk about my son had finally come up to see me. They allowed him in Kernan. And it's a terrible, terrible feeling to be scared of seeing your own child. And that's where I was. I didn't know how to take it. He hadn't seen his dad. He hadn't seen his dad in months. And I just thought about, in this 9-year-old boy's head, what all these terrible thoughts and confusion that are going on about his father. We were so close. And I felt like I let him down. I really did. I felt like I let him down. Even though it wasn't anything of my personal doing, I couldn't, in my mind at that time, be the father that I was and that I want to be. But my son came up and he made it real easy. You know, we walked in the room. Well, me and my son, we watch the Oriole games. That's what we do. We watch sports and we watch the Oriole games. And he came up in the bed yet, and I had everything covered up because I don't think he was ready to see all that yet. And it was a little awkward at first. The first few minutes were a little awkward. And Mom decided that she was going to go and get us lunch down the street from Five Guys, burgers and fries. And so my son, he climbed up in between my legs, and the Oriole game was on, and it was just like it was supposed to be this way. He climbed up between my legs, he rested his head on my chest, and just like that, we were just like peanut butter and jelly again. I mean, we were just right there again. And the feeling, I mean, it was feeling joyous again, you know? It was a feeling that I hadn't felt in a long time. And what it did, it gave me some hope. It gave me some hope again that even in the situation that I was really starting to come to terms with, my son, you know, people say kids are tougher than we give them credit for. And he just sat between, we watched the ball game and we started cutting up joking. It's like nothing ever happened. He seen me for the first time. He came in and I was in that big wheelchair. And in my mind I was thinking, God, what is he going to think about this? Now he's coming in and seeing his dad in this. I mean, this isn't a regular wheelchair. This is one of those big giant ones that drop right with your head. And I was seeing him down the hall. I seen him and Judy walk in. And I was like, my God, what's he going to say now? And he come running up the hall and he's like, that's so cool. I said, I know, ain't it? It's like our own Batmobile. He's like, yeah. I said, we'll take turns riding it when we get home. And he was just so okay with it. He made me feel like it was going to be all right. And in Kernan is where like the third miracle started to take place. I always tell people, shock trauma saved my life, Kernan enhanced my life. And I met some wonderful people in Kernan that helped me with my rehabilitation. I met an aide, a sitter, they're called. They sit with you all night if you need help. Who ended up being a big part of my story when I got home, because I asked her when I got out if my wife worked a few days a week, if she could come be a sitter at my house. And she was in my life there for like 6, 8 months, just from that meeting at Kernan. I met her one night. Her personality just took off with me, and she became part of my life. But third miracle, I met this lady in there. Her name was Deb. And I had already been there in Kernan for about 3 weeks. Now this lady Deb, she came in, I seen her in the gym, and she was just like me. She had all 4 limbs amputated. Different scenario, same result. All 4 limbs were amputated. She was like 58, 59 years old. And when she came into the gym, what I seen in her face was what I felt the first time I came into the gym. And that was hopelessness. And she looked beaten, and she looked like she could use a friend. And I'd been through, I would say, I guess the worst part of it, and I was starting to cope with things a lot better than when I was in her situation. So I had started a conversation with her, and I would see her every day in the gym, and I would go around her room to visit her while I was in there. And I never knew at that point that the miracle was starting by meeting this lady. So I got released from Kernan. Well, let me talk about this first. They gave me these prosthetic legs in Kernan. Now here's the catch to it is, generally with insurance companies, they won't cover your legs until you're out the door. Literally, they'll get into you out in the parking lot. But for insurance reasons, they can't get into you while you're in there, because then the hospital would have to pay for them because they call it some kind of medical need at the hospital. Having said that, they considered my case as catastrophic. That's the way they worded it with the insurance company. So they would actually pay for the legs while I was in the hospital. The people at Kernan never get to see people actually get up and walk because of that reason I just told you. They usually don't get their legs until they're out of there. So I got my legs in Kernan, and I stood up in the gym. I don't know how many people's in that gym, but it's a huge gym. Everyone stopped and cried and clapped and was in complete awe. I got up and walked, and I probably walked about 40, 50 feet. And it was a feel inside I still remember this day, and it was another one of those experiences of hope. And I knew from that point that I was going to walk again. I was going to walk again, and I was going to be able to do some things with my son again. And do some things standing, you know, just getting around the house, being able to do that. Now, taking your hands away is kind of like taking your personality away. That's a whole different thing. So, when I got released out of the hospital and came home, something had happened while I was in the hospital. My friends had all gotten together and all donated and pitched in and built me a wheelchair ramp to my house, put in a remote control front door, and built a handicapped bathroom on the first floor for me. All of it was taken by donations from friends. And this one's a carpenter, this one's a plumber, and they all made it happen for me. Like I said, when I was there, I never went a day without a visit. I had a man come up there, a friend of mine. He was up there 4 or 5 times every week, and it's humbling when a 50-year-old man is cutting up your banana to put in your Raisin Bran and feed it to you. That's true friendship. That's something I'll never, ever forget. Me and this man are very, very close to this day. The things he's done for my family and myself just is in my heart forever. So when I got home, everything was ready for me. My friends made sure that I was taken care of. They had started a fund me page for me that raised quite a bit of money for my family at the time. My church had raised money for us on several occasions to help us with our bills and such. So many people reached out. Before this incident, I'll tell you that it was unfortunate. I would always tell my wife something would happen. I'd be like, nobody cares. Nobody cares. You know, the world is hardened. You know, society has taught us things like that. And after this whole experience, I can never say that again because so many people have reached out to me. I have no idea who most of them are. I mean, my friends did what they did, and it's amazing. But when I look through like that fund me page, it's like the majority of the people, I have no idea who they are. I got donations from Anonymous, donations from this Dream Week team. I was talking to Todd before this. It's like I was down there for 1 week. These people, most of them I may have met in passing in the locker room, just donated amongst themselves. People that weren't even there, alumni of the group, just donated. It's like God's seen fit to make my needs, you know, be fulfilled. And so when I got home to see all that, reality got real. Because now I won't say everyone was gone, but now the fanfare, the visits, everything, now I'm back to life. Now I'm back to home. And now it's to my wife and kid doing everything for me. Everything. You know, my son, 11 years old, should never have to do some of the things he does. And my wife does everything. She goes to work. She comes home and cooks the meals, the laundry, the bills, the dog, everything. Takes care of an 11-year-old son. And she'll never let you know. Never let you know. I can't even know. It's hard to get her to even talk about things. I think she buries a lot of it. I got home, I made myself face the public. I know what I look like. I told my wife right away, I said, I'm going out, let's go to the restaurant and let's get this over with. And I got the looks like you would expect. And I still struggle sometimes looking people straight on. I kind of look through people or look down. But I'm working on that, and that's tough. I do know that most people, you know, in my mind sometimes at first I was like, oh my God, they're laughing, or they're just thinking, man, how awful this person looks, and I know it, but I'm trying to get past that in my life, and it's tough. It is. It was very humbling sitting up here in front of you people doing this. I didn't ask for this to happen. I did not, I didn't sign up for my son having to do the things he does to help his father, for my wife to have to do what she does. I didn't sign up for none of that. But it came anyway, and we're making the best of it that we can. The reality is, when all's said and done, I have a good life, and that's the truth. I managed to go back to work for almost a year. I went back part-time. I got a prosthetic hand. I went back part-time and worked my way up to full-time. Finally, surgery after surgery on the hand, I had to stop, and I just retired in January. Another humbling experience, because that's what I do. I work, and I had, like I said to you earlier, a basic, simple life. Just work, raise my family. I was able to, when I got out, I was able to go coach my son's baseball team again. And it was a pretty good experience because most of the kids I'd already coached, in the prior years. So they were all right with it. But some of the looks I got from some of the little kids, kids are honest. But it was a humbling experience, and it was a great experience. I think people are capable of amazing things given the opportunity. And something as simple as that was huge for me. That was huge. What was that? I had something written on my wall in the hospital. What was that on? Oh gosh, I used to say it all the time. It said, and I lived up to this a lot of times. You don't know how strong you are until strong is your only option. And I lived with that in the hospital for a long time, staring at that on my wall, thinking just that, man. I made it through a lot of stuff, and I'm still here to talk about it. Every morning when I wake up and look and my legs laying against the wall that I got to put on every morning and suit up for another day. You know, I reflect back to that. I reflect back to that slogan. And this lady, Deb, that I told you about, that I met in Kernan, she sent me a video a couple months back. And the third week of December, she sent me a video. And it was her in physical therapy moving sponges with her hands. And the last time I seen her, she didn't have no hands. So she had told me she found out this program at Duke University that in 2016 they granted the hospital, awarded the hospital with 5 grants to do hand transplant surgery. And she had gotten one of them. I mean, what is the odds of that? 5 grants in the country, and she got one of them. So she's putting these things in a box, moving them from here. And the hand was, I mean, it was incredible. It was a live hand. It wasn't a prosthetic. So I called her and I congratulated her. I said, unbelievable, Debbie, you look so good. I'm so happy for you. So she had said, you should call the surgeon. I said, you should call the surgeon. He said, I think you would be a great candidate for this. So I called the surgeon, and she called me back the next day. She called me back, and she said, Mr. Benner, I'd like you to come up and see me and discuss the options. So I went up there and talked to her, and I guess I passed the eye test for, I don't know, pity, sympathy, whatever, I'm sure. And when she walked in the room, I'm sure she noticed everything about me right away. And we talked a little bit, and she said, Mr. Benner, I want to help you and your family. And she sent me down to get some x-rays done. She said, go home and think about this, and give me a call back and let me know if you would like to move forward. So my wife went home and talked about it. And I called her and I said, we decided that we'd like to move forward with what you want to do, any plans. She called us back about a month later. She said, I want you to come down to Duke University here and for about a week, and we got some tests for you to do. I had so many tests done, MRIs, bone scans, nerve tests, ultrasounds, blood work, everything, psychiatrist, social worker, physical therapy. I had to meet with all these people, surgeons, and we had to go back down the following Monday to see the kidney doctor. When all this happened to me, I was on dialysis for 6 weeks, so my kidneys, were damaged. So this Tuesday, it just passed, last Tuesday, I get a call from the surgeon. She said, the board met today and we all agreed that you're awarded one of the grants for a hand transplant. So, the third miracle was happening before I ever realized it. When God put me in place with this lady, Deb, in Kernan Hospital some 2 years ago, the miracle was already happening. I wasn't aware of it. You know what all God did? All I did was be a good guy. That's all I did was be a nice guy to this lady who looked like she needed some help, she needed some support. And at that time, you know, she touched my soul, and God told me to go over and talk to the lady and maybe share a little bit of my experience and give her some hope. So I wasn't even aware at the time. Here it is 2 years later, and this lady put me in contact with another person, and I passed a whole array of tests, and I'm going to get a hand. And I go down next week for a few more tests to meet the anesthesiologist, some hand surgeons, start familiarizing myself with everybody, and begin the process. I'll be put on a list. And the good thing, this isn't like a kidney or a liver. You're not on it for years. The lady, Deb, she went on the list in September. In November, she got her hands. So I'd love to say, you know what? When my son found out, it was me and my son in the room when the doctor called and Judy was working. And my son said, good, he said, man, we'll get this to play some sports again. Oh my God. And that's my whole heart. That's my world. I want to be able to be that husband again. I want to be able to take some of the workload off my wife again, so she doesn't have to do everything. You know, I want to be able to be there with my son again, outside throwing the ball instead of being on the sidelines watching. You know, when I watch mom out there having to throw the ball and catch the ball and hit, you know, it just hurts. It hurts, and I gotta eat it. I gotta eat it right now, you know, and it bothers me. But I guess God has seen my pain and made this opportunity possible. I would just ask you guys, please continue to pray for me, because this journey is far from over. We have to, my wife and I have to go. When this happens, we have to move down to North Carolina for about 3 to 4 months. My wife will be on FMLA, is that what it's called? Work or let her leave for 3 months. My child's going to be home. We're going to come home on the weekends. I have to be there because I have to do therapy 5 days a week, 4 to 6 hours a day. And at that point, I'll have to go back once a month for the first 18 months and get the rejection medicine. But it doesn't look like it's going to happen. I just need your prayers. I need your prayers because I believe up to this point, I've had thousands of people pray for me. I always tell people, just keep praying. I believe it works, and I believe it got me to this point. So I would just ask in closing, continue to pray for me, continue to pray for my family. My life is good. I do have a good life. And in case you missed it, I give this all to my wife. This is a love story is what this really is. Because if I just try to outweigh everything with the negative things that have happened to me, I'll miss the beauty of all the positive things that have happened to me. You know, I've got to watch love. I got to be a spectator watching unconditional love right in front of me. Okay? A lot of people will never be aware of what I've been able to see. Like I talk about, when I watch my wife do everything. When I watch my child when he comes in the door from school, the first thing he says, Dad, you need anything? You know, I get to watch things like that unfold when I come through the door from the first time at the hospital and everything is done in the house. Everything. The people that brought it from Kernan, the aides and the physical therapist come to my house said this was the best. They call it like a pre-ready, that they got to take you to make sure your house is wheelchair accessible, ready for you to come home, handicap accessible. They said this was the best house they've ever been to. I didn't pay a dime for it. My friends did all that with their time and their money. You know, that's all the love. So when I talk about all the negatives that's happened to me, the beauty really lies in the love that I've got to watch happen. And I really love it. In closing, I want to thank God for this experience, and for all you people in your prayers, just please continue to pray. Thank you.